I'm home alone, but I'm not really alone. There's no one here. Albert had left early in the morning, said he had meetings in the city. Cyrus is out of town, as always. Instead of caring about me, he's chasing the world. These past few years between us have been spent leaving me in solitude. This emptiness in the house, sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I get lost for hours like I'm in another world. But today I feel a little freer. I'm wearing nothing but black leggings and my bra while I'm cleaning. I lose myself in a world where everything slowly falls into place. There's no one at home, absolutely no one. I know Albert won't even come back late tonight, and Cyrus isn't expected to return to the city until the weekend. This loneliness, this silence, it brings me peace. I can just be with myself, but only with myself, no one else. How long has it been since I've felt this way? Getting lost in everything, existing without anyone seeing me, it's almost like a kind of freedom. Sometimes I think I need to add some excitement back into my life, really. And when I feel that way, I remember that big black toy. It sits in the corner of the shelf, quietly reminding me of itself at the most unexpected moments. From time to time, well, no one sees, no one hears, but in that moment, something stirs inside me. This is mine, a brief escape deep within my soul. For a second, it's just me and this toy. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so I can keep sharing more captivating real stories. Watch this video till the end because this story is about to get incredibly interesting. Just then, a sound, the door creaks open slightly. My eyes dart to the sliver of light sneaking through the door. Completely unprepared, my heart starts pounding like it's about to burst out of my chest. My eyes widen. In that moment, everything freezes. Cyrus, the stepson, stands behind the door, half hidden in the shadow, silently watching me. For a brief moment, the world stops. We just stare into each other's eyes. His eyes seem to see everything, like we're lost in time. Will he take another step, or will he just stand there? He wasn't a kid anymore, he was 22 now. Yes, his youth unsettled me as my heart raced. Every part of my body struggled to make sense of what was happening. His gaze set something inside me on fire. My breath hitched. In that moment, I didn't know what to do. I just looked at him, and he looked at me. A mess of emotion swirled inside me, chaotic, intense. How long did that silent stretch last? A minute? An hour? Then I hear it, that soft rustle, that unexplainable movement from behind the door. A hand pushes the gap just a little wider. Cyrus steps in, 1 foot forward. My voice comes out quiet, low. What are you doing? The question carries no real tone, yet somehow it holds so much meaning. For a split second, the world completely stopped. In that moment, all I could see were Cyrus's eyes, his gaze sharp, mocking, as if he already knew everything that was going on inside. He looked almost pleased, like he was enjoying this. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was like everything was crashing down on me. My heart was pounding so hard the only thing I could hear was my own breathing echoing in my ears. Nice tastes you've got, he said. His voice carried that teasing tone, yet it sounded like he genuinely meant it, like there was a hidden satisfaction in his words. In that moment, something strange stirred inside me. He was watching me, and every move he made felt unfamiliar to me. 1,000 questions swirled in my mind, yet I could still read something in his eyes. And you're so beautiful, Aisha, he said. As those words spilled from his mouth, it felt like they belonged to another world. I tried to figure out what he meant, but my feelings were so tangled that I felt myself slipping unintentionally. His gaze cornered me, as if he knew everything. You need to be more careful, he said. But it wasn't just a warning, it was like he was teaching me something. In that moment, I felt like prey. My skin prickled, but at the same time, there was this strange pull. I didn't know what to do. You know those moments when fear and curiosity mix together? That was it. On one hand, I could feel how close he was getting, and on the other, I was trying to put some distance between us. Then his tone changed. "I know, stepmom," he said almost mockingly. "My dad's old 65. He doesn't seem to be paying attention to you anymore." That sentence, the moment he said it, something inside me shattered. It was like he knew everything, his father's indifference, what this all was, why it was happening. He seemed to enjoy playing this game. "He doesn't seem to be paying attention," he said, but his voice implied something more. There was a storm inside me, something shaking me to my core. I still couldn't figure out what I felt. I noticed the way he looked at me, that mocking smile. It was like he was calculating everything. When our eyes met, the contradictions inside me grew, anger towards him, but also this strange pull. There was something about him that felt too close, but that closeness was a trap, a game. Without even realizing it, I was getting pulled into it. He took another step, then stepped back, but this time it didn't feel like he was giving me space, it felt like a trap. There was a kind of sly amusement in his eyes, and his gaze pulled me deeper. It was like he was silently saying, "This isn't over, we're just getting started." In that moment, I didn't know what to do. I still couldn't react, couldn't say anything. I couldn't stop the chaos in my mind, the swirl of emotions taking over me, that emptiness, the strange pull, and the words he'd said. None of it made sense, but somehow it all came together. Without knowing what I thought or felt, I kept sinking into the darkness in my own eyes. When we sat at the dinner table, the atmosphere was strangely calm. Albert, just like in the old days, was sloppily putting together a meal while Cyrus sat silently in the corner, smiling at me in that strange way without taking his eyes off me. While I ate quietly, aware of his gaze, I felt an odd unease growing inside me. Cyrus's stare suggested something, but I couldn't quite grasp what it was. Albert's smiling face warmed the room, but something was missing as always. Albert was absorbed in himself, focused on the meal, the house, but I was in a completely different world. As Cyrus approached the table, he placed his hand on the back of my chair and slowly said, "Enjoy your meal." His words were polite, but there was meaning behind them, and even if there wasn't, it hit me strangely when his fingertips traced lightly across my shoulder. I knew he realized I had noticed something stirred inside me, but I quickly tried to pull myself together. Those small touches echoed in my mind, my heart pounding faster. How much I wished I could forget everything but Cyrus's gentle touch. The way it felt on my skin left a mark, a sign that nothing could ever be the same again. As the meal went on, Cyrus's actions became more deliberate. Sitting at the table, his hands started to lightly brush against mine. For a moment, I wanted to pull away, but my eyes stayed stuck on him. I could feel something shifting, but what was it? It was like time had suddenly sped up, like everything had changed. I tried to pull my hands away quickly, but when our eyes met, he sent me that sharp, hair-raising look again. Suddenly, the warmth inside me grew, a strange heat wrapping around my body. Something inside me started to tremble. I still didn't know if I was doing the right thing, but somehow I was responding to him, starting to face how I felt about him. Cyrus's gaze came closer with every move, and I was trying to resist it, but this warmth, this pull, was leaving me defenseless. Every breath I took felt like it was suffocating me. In that moment, I realized just how much was missing, how alone I really was. Albert never noticed a thing. Everything felt so foreign to me, but at the same time, it was alluring. Cyrus touched my hand in a different way this time. My eyes got lost in his. For a moment, it felt like the forgotten memories of my past had come rushing back. As a 55-year-old woman, feeling this way again was strange, but in a weird way, I felt excited. The heat I felt inside me climbed all the way up to my throat. For a while, I lost track of time, but at one point, I felt Albert's gaze from across the table. He was still focused on his food, but I couldn't escape, as his eyes carefully followed me. My vision was starting to blur. In that moment, something inside my body was changing. My emotions and my body were all tangled up. Every second I spent with him made this chaos inside me even stronger. By the end of the evening, the meal was over. Cyrus and Albert quietly left the table. My eyes still lingered on them in some strange way, but I couldn't calm down. I felt a weird sense of. I stood up slowly, and as I made my way to my room, the mess inside me only grew. When I entered my room, there was this chilling warmth again, but this time it wasn't just my body, it was my soul too. As I laid my head on the pillow, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. My eyes ached, but I still couldn't sleep. Cyrus's touches, the moments his hands brushed against me, kept spinning in my mind. A sleepless night tried to force me into rest, but every time I tried to close my eyes, the pull inside me, the tangled feelings, came back to life. All night I kept trying to shut my eyes, but I didn't sleep. When I finally woke up for real, the hot and cold feelings inside me were completely mixed up. The next morning, Albert had left to visit a friend. It was just me and Cyrus in the house. Albert's absence brought me some relief, but it was also unsettling in a strange way. Cyrus's gaze and movements were still fresh in my mind, like everything could change at any second. When I went down to the kitchen for breakfast, I found Cyrus sitting at the table in his bathrobe. Normally, he was never this late for breakfast, but today felt different. The robe hung loosely around his body, and for a moment, it disarmed me. No matter how much I didn't want to, my eyes kept drifting to him. When Cyrus saw me, a faint smile crossed his face. Without hesitation, he walked toward the table and sat down. "I was wondering where you disappeared to so early in the morning," he said in a teasing tone. I couldn't answer because something inside me had shifted. My feelings were all over the place, but every single one of them seemed focused on him. Cyrus's awareness felt like it was seeping into my soul. As I prepared breakfast, he came closer to the table to help me, but this time his approach was different. I could feel him following me with every move, his presence shadowing each step I took. Then suddenly, he grabbed my shoulder, leaning in closer. Quietly but very clearly, he said, "I can't wait to satisfy your needs." The words echoed inside me, slow and deep. I felt something inside me break, but the breaking was both painful and strangely good. Cyrus's approach woke something up in my body. Every move he made felt like a warm touch on my skin. My eyes almost without realizing drifted to him, and for a moment, I felt even more vulnerable. The confusion inside me kept getting deeper. Slowly, I decided to finish my breakfast and head up to my room, but in that moment, I felt like everything had taken one step closer. As I walked toward the stairs, he suddenly grabbed me by the waist, pulling me close. My heart started pounding hard. Slowly but with determination, he held me tightly. For a moment, I didn't know what to do or even how I felt, but right then, all the noise inside me went silent. I closed my eyes, my breathing quickened, and I realized I was lost in his closeness. Everything happened so fast, so unexpectedly. The mix of regret and excitement wouldn't leave me alone. Slowly, I pulled away from Cyrus, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. As I got up from the bed, I realized my legs were trembling a bit. I needed to forget that moment, but how could I? Regret was eating me up on one side, but curiosity, and a strange heat, were growing even stronger on the other. I decided to take a shower. I thought maybe the warm water would help me relax a bit. The water quickly spread across my skin, leaving droplets behind, but it couldn't wash away the thoughts in my head. Cyrus's teasing tone, the way he made me feel, and the marks he left on me were still fresh and alive. I shouldn't have let this happen, but somehow I couldn't stop it. Part of me was thinking about how wrong everything I'd done was, while another part realized how much this had opened up something new inside me in such a short time. The fact that Cyrus took advantage of Albert's age as an excuse to pull these stunts had triggered something in me. I knew it would all come to an end once Albert found out, but until that day, everything was becoming more and more dangerous. Cyrus and I were ending up alone together way too often. Now I regretted it, but I wanted it. I knew what we were doing was wrong, but somehow it felt like it was already too late for anything else. One day, as I was passing through the kitchen to grab a drink, I found Cyrus there again. He gave me a look that made it clear he wanted to approach me again, as if nothing had ever happened. Quietly and quickly, he walked toward me. Deep inside, I could feel my heart racing with every step he took. Suddenly, he wrapped his arms around my waist and leaned in close to my ear. "You don't realize anything, do you?" he said, his voice even more teasing this time. Resting one hand on my waist, he kept getting closer. "I fooled my father, but this game isn't ending." Cyrus's words sank deep into my mind, cutting right through me. The way he spoke so close only made my feelings and the mess inside me even sharper. But right then, I heard the sound of the door opening. I froze. Albert had walked in. Everything in my head unraveled in an instant. Albert slammed the door shut, and his eyes immediately landed on the two of us. It didn't take long for him to notice my panic and how both Cyrus and I had completely frozen, his arm still wrapped around my waist, pulling me close. Albert's sudden arrival stopped everything dead in its tracks. No matter how bold I thought I was in that tense moment, I realized just how dangerous this all was. Albert walking into the house shifted everything to a completely new level. Right then, the tension between Cyrus and me only grew sharper when Albert shut the door quickly and turned his eyes on us. The discomfort he felt was written all over his face. His eyes showed a mix of anger, suspicion, and fear. "What's going on here?" Albert asked, his voice trembling like it could break any second. Cyrus still had his arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me toward. I'll never forget the look on Albert's face as his eyes moved from him to me. The silence in the room grew heavier with each passing second. Albert slowly started walking toward us. At that moment, it felt like a wave of chaos was spreading everywhere. "What are you doing, Cyrus? You're my son. How the hell did I raise someone who would do something like this? And Aisha, you're my wife. What the hell is happening?" Albert shouted, his voice filled with so much shock and anger that every word felt like a nail being hammered straight into us. Cyrus, trying to act innocent, lowered his voice and said, "Dad, you've got it all wrong." But Albert's fury shot through the roof, his eyes were ice cold. I had never seen him this angry before. In that moment, he couldn't even believe his own son. "Are you kidding me? She's my wife, your stepmother. What the hell is going on in this house? Look at the mess we've come to," he yelled. Albert stormed toward Cyrus, his steps faster and more forceful. His voice cracked from the weight of his anger and disbelief, but the fear in his eyes was just as intense. No matter how much I wanted to explain, I couldn't. I didn't even fully understand what had just happened, but one thing was clear: everything was different now. Cyrus froze for a second, then quickly turned and headed to his room. But Albert wasn't done. He shouted after him, "Go on, leave. I'm done with you." When Cyrus was finally thrown out of the house, the heavy silence that followed was suffocating. It hung in the air, thick with fear and uncertainty. Albert looked at me, took a deep breath but said nothing. He just shook his head slowly. In that moment, I knew something had ended, but the anger and disappointment in Albert's eyes changed everything. That day, Albert and I didn't exchange a single word. The silence was so thick, so deep, that talking would have only made things worse. I didn't know what to do or how to feel. I realized just how wrong everything was, but at the same time, the emptiness inside me only grew larger. In the days that followed, Albert didn't speak to me at all. The entire atmosphere of the house had shifted. The hurt and disappointment in his eyes ate away at me. Slowly but surely, we were cold and distant, like strangers living in the same space. Through his silence, Albert made me feel the full weight of what I had done, how everything had been ruined, and how much we had lost. A week later, Albert told me he wanted a divorce. He explained how wrong everything had gone, how we had grown so distant from each other that there was no way back. He had no faith left that anything could be fixed. At that moment, my entire life changed. The decision to divorce crushed us both, but maybe deep down, it was what we had both seen coming. And just like that, my 15-year marriage to Albert came to an end. In such a short amount of time, everything had fallen apart. I learned, with a deep ache in my heart and overwhelming regret, just how quickly things could change. Things could unravel, but at the same time, maybe I also realized it had to happen. All that was left was the memory of a love and peace we once had, now completely gone. If you made it this far, I know this story must have hit you hard. There's so much more to share, and trust me, you don't want to miss any of it. Hit that follow button, turn on notifications, and don't forget to leave a comment about what you thought. I'm dying to hear your perspective, so let's talk in the comments. Your support means the world to me.